Ever wonder why, like, sometimes the smartest people make the worst decisions? It's so weird. Like, you think they'd have it all figured out,
You'd think.
but they don't. Today, we're going to deep dive into that very question.
Sounds fascinating.
I'm excited. We've got some cool sources. We got this CNBC article by Morgan Housel. He's like a behavioral finance expert.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, so we've got that. And then some discussions on Reddit, Mensa, and Today I learned.
Good.
And then this really thought-provoking article from Psychology Today.
Interesting mix.
Yeah. So basically what we're trying to figure out is there like a downside to being really smart?
Yeah. Is there a point where your brain power actually works against you?
Yeah, exactly. So let's dive into that first source, the CNBC article by Morgan Housel.
All right.
He says that smart people, they're like really good storytellers,
Right.
which can actually backfire when they're making decisions.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because they can make these like really complex narratives.
Yeah, I can see that.
But then they get trapped in their own stories and they can't see the truth.
Makes sense, like when they're justifying their mistakes.
Exactly. They come up with these elaborate explanations instead of just admitting they were wrong.
Like they're almost too good at convincing themselves.
Right. And this actually ties into what psychologists call cognitive bias.
Oh, yeah. Cognitive bias. That's our tendency to look for information that confirms what we already believe.
Exactly. Like, for example, I used to think this one band was like the best band ever. I only listened to people who agreed with me. Total cognitive bias.
Haha. Classic example.
But then speaking of biases and stuff, there's this hilarious anecdote from the Mensa forum on Reddit. This one user, they got into an argument with their coworkers about whether a clock has arms. Can you believe that?
Wow. That's amazing. Like even really smart people can have totally different interpretations of something so simple.
I know. It just goes to show that, like, no one is always right. And maybe we should question our assumptions a little more often.
Absolutely. It's about being open to other perspectives, even if they seem weird at first.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, moving on to House's second point. He says that smart people are often drawn to complex solutions, even for problems that could be solved more simply.
Oh, I see that all the time. It's like they can't resist overcomplicating things.
Yeah, and he uses the example of like dollar cost averaging as an investment strategy.
Oh, yeah. It's a super simple strategy, but it can be really effective.
Exactly.
Mm.
And it's way less stressful than trying to time the market perfectly.
For sure. Sometimes the best approach is just to keep things simple.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to work with the chaos instead of trying to control it. Like, have you ever overcomplicated a situation where a simpler approach would have been better?
Oh, countless times. Especially in my early career, I was always trying to impress everyone with my complex analysis, but sometimes the obvious answer was right there in front of me.
It's so easy to get caught up in the details and miss the big picture.
Totally. I'm reminded of this quote from the Ken Burns documentary, Cancer, the Emperor of All Maladies. There's this brilliant cancer researcher who says that persuading people to quit smoking would have a far greater impact on cancer mortality than anything he could accomplish in his lifetime.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
It's like, even in a field as complex as cancer research, the simplest solutions can be the most impactful.
Absolutely. It makes you think about all the ways we overcomplicate things in our own lives when maybe we should just focus on the basics.
It's all about finding that balance, right?
Definitely.
So we've been talking about how smart people can get tripped up by their own thinking, right? Like the storytelling thing and overcomplicating stuff.
Right, exactly.
But this next article from Psychology Today takes it a step further. It talks about the downsides of critical thinking, which sounds kind of crazy, right?
It does sound a bit counterintuitive. You'd think critical thinking would be, like, the key to good decisions.
Right. Like the more you think critically, the better choices you'll make.
But it's not always that simple.
Yeah, so this article talks about some research by Dan Kahan, and he found that on like politically charged issues, smarter people can actually become more polarized.
Oh, wow.
Like think about things like global warming or vaccines.
Yeah, those are definitely hot button topics.
Yeah, and you'd think that like the more people know about the science, the more they would agree.
Right.
But apparently that's not always the case.
No, not necessarily, because our reasoning abilities are influenced by our existing beliefs.
So even when we're trying to be objective, our biases still creep in.
Exactly. Like we're more likely to accept information that confirms what we already believe.
And reject anything that challenges our worldview.
Exactly.
It's kind of like that story from the Mensa forum
Mm.
about the guy who didn't believe in climate change.
Oh, yeah, even though there's like a ton of scientific evidence.
Right. It's like his intelligence was actually helping him rationalize away the truth.
It's a classic example of what psychologists call motivated reasoning.
Motivated reasoning. So it's like we're motivated to believe what we want to believe.
Pretty much. And the article also mentions a study on vaccines,
Okay.
where giving parents more information about vaccine safety didn't actually reduce their concerns.
So more information didn't lead to better understanding.
In some cases, it actually reinforced their existing views,
Yeah.
even if those views were inaccurate.
That's kind of scary. Like, what's the solution then, if just giving people facts doesn't work?
Well, it's not just about presenting information. It's also about understanding the psychology behind those beliefs.
So, like, appealing to emotions as well as logic.
Exactly. It's a much more nuanced approach.
Right. But this whole conversation is making me think about the challenges of being really smart. We've talked about how intelligence can sometimes backfire, but the Reddit threads also highlight some unique struggles that people with high IQs face.
Yes, absolutely. It's important to acknowledge that intelligence can come with its own set of challenges.
Like, for example, one thing that came up a lot was the difficulty of finding intellectual peers.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's got to be tough to relate to people when you feel like you're always the smartest person in the room.
Absolutely. It can lead to feelings of isolation and loneliness.
And then there's the pressure of high expectations.
Oh, yeah, that too. If you're labeled as gifted from a young age, there's this constant pressure to live up to that label.
It's like you're always expected to be perfect.
Right. And that can create a fear of failure, a reluctance to take risks.
And even imposter syndrome, where you doubt your own abilities.
Exactly. It's like you feel like a fraud even though you've achieved so much.
And then on top of all that, there's the curse of knowledge.
Ah, yes, the curse of knowledge.
It's like when you know something so well, it's hard to explain it to someone who doesn't.
It's like you can't remember what it's like to not know something.
Exactly. And that can make communication really difficult, especially in like professional settings.
Absolutely. It can lead to misunderstandings and frustration.
And people might think you're being arrogant or condescending.
Even if you're not.
Yeah. So it seems like intelligence is a double-edged sword.
In a way, it is. It can be both a blessing and a curse.
And it highlights the importance of other qualities like empathy, self-awareness, and communication skills.
Those are essential for anyone, but especially for people with high IQs. Because without them, intelligence can become more of a hindrance than a help.
Yeah, so it's not enough to just be smart. You have to know how to use your intelligence effectively.
Exactly. And how to connect with others in a meaningful way.
So it seems like intelligence is just one piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole picture.
Right. It's just one piece.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of stuff, right? Like how smart people can get tripped up by their own thinking and how intelligence isn't always a straight path to good decisions.
Right. It's more nuanced than that.
Yeah, way more nuanced. So, like, what's the big takeaway for you?
Well, for me, it's that intelligence doesn't exist in isolation. It's always interacting with our emotions, our biases, even our experiences.
Right, it's not just about IQ. It's about how we use our intelligence.
Exactly. And how we deal with those inevitable setbacks.
Because, let's face it, we all make mistakes. Even the smartest people.
Oh, absolutely. But it's how we learn from those mistakes that really matters.
So it's not about beating ourselves up when we mess up. It's about being open to learning and growing.
Exactly. And that's where self-awareness and humility come in. Recognizing that we don't have all the answers.
So even super smart people need a dose of humility.
Everyone does. It helps us stay open to new ideas and different perspectives.
Yeah, because there's always more to learn.
Always.
And it's not just about book smarts either.
Right. There are so many different ways to be intelligent.
Like emotional intelligence, creativity, problem-solving skills.
Exactly. Intelligence comes in many forms.
That's a good point. So, like, we've talked about how intelligence can sometimes lead to overthinking, getting stuck in our biases.
Right.
But what if we looked at it from a different angle? Like, what if we use our intelligence as a force for good?
I love that idea. What if we used our brain power to solve problems, to help others, to make the world a better place?
Yeah, instead of just getting lost in our own heads.
Right. It's about connecting with people, building bridges, finding common ground.
That's a powerful vision.
Yeah.
And it's something we can all strive for, regardless of our IQ.
Absolutely. We all have something unique to contribute.
So to all our listeners out there, keep diving deep, keep asking questions, and keep using your intelligence to make a positive impact. And until next time, stay curious.